These are the sunstone.
Sunstone, yeah.
Finding the sun when it's cloudy. It's a good day for it.
Solsten in Danish.
Solstice.
Yeah. So did they really use it, or is it just a myth?
They definitely used something, and this is most likely what it was.
They have not.
We're about 80% certain, but until we actually find one in a ship, then there's the possibility it was something else.
They're not found like definitely true evidence.
Yeah,
it's just maybe.
Yeah, it's they've been found in ships, just not Viking ships. And they've been found in Viking settlements, just not in Viking ships.
Many people have for quite some time been wondering if the Vikings used a sunstone to navigate the sea. Historians, researchers, and even folks down at the local pub have arm wrestled this question to exhaustion. In recent years, has TV series such as The Vikings made people who are not necessarily that much into history aware of these crystals? I think in particular about the scene when Ragnar Lothbrok held up a sunstone to the sky in an almost religious fashion, as if he had discovered the secrets to navigate the seas. You will also see this trend echoing throughout the many Viking markets in Scandinavia, where merchants often have them for sale at their stalls. Many of these markets have specific rules for what you are allowed to sell, and these rules have in recent years been tightened, but sunstones are still sold. So if they are still sold, they must have been used during the Viking Age, right? Before we dig into the meat of this video, let's take a look at what a sunstone even is. Sunstones are made from calcite, and they have been found across the planet in areas that have high concentrations of basalt. Basalt is formed through the cooling and solidification of magma. Since Iceland is the host of approximately 130 volcanoes, there are some good chances of finding them on this island. Sunstones are not just white, they can be found in all kinds of colors, but this particular transparent crystal became known throughout Europe as Icelandspar. This was because they had the biggest mine with the highest quality. This mine is located in East Iceland, and this mine supplied the whole of Europe with an enormous amount of transparent calcite crystals from the mid-17th century until 1975, when the mine was shut down because the remaining deposits were of such poor quality that it was not considered good enough. To this day, all of the transparent calcite crystals, regardless of origin, are referred to as Icelandspar. A question we have to ask ourselves: if the Vikings used a sunstone as navigation, then from where did they get them? Did the first Icelandic settlers find areas where they could extract this crystal, or were they able to walk around and pick them up from the ground? Did they stumble upon them while looking for iron? And did they also find them in the eastern parts of Iceland? If this area is, or has been, in particular rich with transparent calcite crystals, then there could still be some evidence left behind that could prove that it was mined at other locations during the Viking Age. There has recently been discovered a small settlement in East Iceland. This settlement is believed to have been among the earliest settlements, and archaeological excavations show that it was used for hunting and mining. So we know that there was mining activity in the area from the beginning, but if they also mined crystals is so far anyone's guess. As we say in Danish, I know that I walk like a cat around the hot porridge. At gå som katten om den varme grød. So, has there been found a sunstone from a Viking settlement, or perhaps a Viking ship? It may come as a surprise to you, but there's actually never been found a single sunstone in connection with a Viking excavation. The oldest sunstone that could have been used for navigation was found among the wreckage of a warship called the Alderney, which sank between England and France in 1592. Some archaeologists made the assumption that this crystal was used for navigation because it was found about a meter away from another navigation tool. So in other words, speculations. But it is a bit interesting that a sunstone may have been used by the English fleet, and perhaps it was a descendant from Iceland. Or maybe it was just used as a paperweight. Nobody really knows. There is an Icelandic manuscript that was written between the 12th and 13th century that has often been used to prove that the Vikings did use a sunstone as a navigation tool. This manuscript contains a short story from around 1030 when the Norwegian king Olav Haraldsson II visited a rich and wise farmer by the name Raudulfur. In this story, late in the night, his son Sigurd was asked about his attributes, and he told the king that he has mastered a skill where he can tell the time of day and night, even if the sky is hidden by the clouds. The weather was thick and snowy, as Sigurd had predicted. Then the king summoned Sigurd and Dagur to him. The king made people look out, and they could nowhere see a clear sky. Then he asked Sigurd to tell where the sun was at that time. He gave a clear assertion. Then the king made them fetch the solar stone, and held it up and saw where the light radiated from the stone, and thus directly verified Sigurd's prediction. This text could indicate that sunstones were used during the Viking Age, but it is simply not enough to conclude that it was the case. And what are the chances that a king in 1030 would be interested in a sunstone if it was a common tool for navigation? Even if it was not common and just used by a small segment of the population, wouldn't a king have heard of it by the end of the Viking Age? If we step out of the Viking Age for just a moment, so we can get an understanding of why this crystal is so special, and why it was sold by the tons to the rest of Europe. Icelandspar is a lot more than just a pretty crystal that you can sit and admire in your hand. It has actually been used for hundreds of years, and it has been studied by people who conducted research within optics. One of these researchers was Sir Isaac Newton, who wrote a book about optics in 1704. In this book, he explained how he observed a ray of white light turn into an array of colors by traveling through a crystal. These colors can then, with the use of another crystal, be converted into a ray of white light again. If you're into old school music, then you have probably seen something like this before, on the cover of the album The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. This way of bending and reflecting light is called prism, and according to the researchers who studied optics, the best element for this use was Icelandspar. You don't have to be a professor or have any kind of special tools to see how the light behaves. Anyone with an Icelandspar can observe this happening when looking through the crystal. If you have seen a rainbow, which most people have, then you have already observed the bending of light, because when sunlight hits a rain droplet, some of the light is slowed down and reflected. Just like through a crystal, the colors on the rainbow are always in the order of the wavelength, from longest to shortest: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. It's pretty simple to find the sun with a sunstone, but I will explain it anyway. When you're looking through a sunstone, you're not looking for colors, but for shadows. If you draw a dot on top of the crystal and then look through it from below, then two dots will appear. If you then hold the crystal up to the sky and rotate the crystal until the two dots have exactly the same intensity or darkness, at that angle, the upward facing surface indicates the direction of the sun. There's no doubt that a sunstone can be used to locate the sun. This method with a dot has been tested, and it was possible to find the location of the sun within 1 degree, even on cloudy days or under twilight conditions, when the sun was just 4 degrees above the horizon. It is a bit ironic that Icelandspar has been considered a method of navigation during the Viking Age, when we take into consideration how important this crystal has been in the advancement of science. The attributes of the sunstone have not only been studied by famous researchers such as Rasmus Bartolin, Sir Isaac Newton, and William Nicol of Edinburgh, but it has actually also been used in an array of modern technologies. Polariscopes, polarimeters, photometers, petrographic microscopes, and a gun sight to shoot down German planes in World War II are all examples of technologies that have used Iceland spar. So, as you can see, this crystal has been very important for hundreds of years, and possibly also with roots back to our ancient ancestors. Speculations, theories, excavations, and stories from 1,000 years ago are all valid sources to bring into this discussion, but is there not someone who actually tested the sunstone theory in a proper manner within an academic framework? Yes, there are. A study was conducted by 2 researchers at the University of Budapest. The research concluded that not only could a sunstone have been a possibility, but it may, in fact, have been the method that used to reach Greenland. The research was conducted with the use of computer simulations, based on the theory that the Vikings used Bergen in Norway as a starting point to sail to the settlement in south of Greenland. The study conducted thousands of computer simulations along the 60 degrees 21:55 north latitude. The Viking voyages were simulated for 2 specific dates: spring equinox, the 21st of March, and summer solstice, the 21st of June. The solar elevation angles were calculated for the latitude on an hourly basis. The speed of the Viking ships was set to 11 kilometers an hour. The Vikings used different types of ships with different maximal velocities, and therefore they chose to select an average speed of an average-sized ship with a mast of 21 meters in height. This means that a trip would have taken approximately 3 weeks to complete. Figure 1 shows 2 extreme cases of 1,000 simulated Viking voyages from Bergen in Norway to Greenland at spring equinox, if a sunstone is used as a method of navigation. Figure 1a shows the simulated results of using a sunstone every 1 hour while sailing west. All of the green lines are trips that would have been successful. Figure 1b shows the simulated results of using a sunstone every 6 hours. Only 9 out of 1,000 were successful in reaching Greenland. If the sunstone was used every 1 to 3 hours at spring equinox and summer solstice, then there would be a success rate between 92.2 to 100% to arrive at their destination in Greenland. However, if the sunstone was used every 4 hours, then there would only be a 32.1 to 58.7% chance that the voyagers would be successful. If the sunstone was used every 5 hours, then the chances of success would drop to below 4% at summer solstice, but surprisingly at spring equinox the chances of success were approximately 100%. If the sunstone was used every 6 hours, then the success rate would drop to between 3.0 to 6.1 at spring equinox and 0.9 to 1.9 at summer solstice. Based on these results, the researchers concluded that the use of sunstones for navigation is surprisingly successful at spring equinox and summer solstice, even in cloudy weathers, if the navigator uses the stone at least once every 3 hours. Figure 3 shows 1,000 simulated Viking sailing routes from southern Greenland to Norway at spring equinox, if a sunstone is used every 1 to 6 hours. All of these trips are successful because they make landfall somewhere on the coast of Europe. This means that if the sailors had enough food and water and did not sink, they would most likely have been able to return every single time. According to the researchers, it was important to use the sunstone an equal number of times during the morning and afternoon. Morning readings could result the ship in steering too far north, and afternoon readings could cause it to sail too far south, which would result in missing Greenland and ending up on the coast of North America. These computer simulations made me think that it must have taken a lot of courage to sail all the way to Greenland. Imagine sailing on the open sea for 3 to 4 weeks, while quite literally being at the mercy of the weather. the people who were experienced navigators and knew how to navigate long distances would probably have been held in high respect by their companions. We will probably never hear the stories of all those who failed the trip by missing their destination, but there might be a skeleton sitting in a shipwreck somewhere in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, holding on to one of these sunstones while waiting to join the skeleton army at Ragnarok. Because one thing is for sure, a navigator who is unable to find his or her way was probably not worthy of Valhalla. My conclusion is, if you believe that the Vikings could have used the sunstone as a method of navigation, then you are free to do so. I don't think it is silly to think so after conducting this research, especially with the academic research that has been conducted within this field, and when I consider that the computer simulations have proven that it would have been possible to sail from Norway to the settlement in southern Greenland. However, it is a problem that there is no concrete evidence, so for me this will just be a theory until we find sunstones in the vicinity of a Viking ship at multiple excavations. The reason why I say multiple is because a sunstone does not prove anything if only found once, because it could just have been seen as a pretty crystal. I think it is a problem that most people were cremated, and they may very well have been sent to Valhalla with their most precious belongings, which in the case of a sailor could have been his navigation tools, such as a sunstone. But since we find new pieces of jewelry and other objects of interest on nearly a yearly basis, then it is still possible that this mystery will be solved one day, but that day has yet to come. If you want to see more videos like this, then please consider joining the channel, so I have the means to continue. The more time I have on my hands, the deeper I can dig, and the better the videos can get. Your contribution is the ink that fuels the pen and supports me in spreading the ancient knowledge of the past for future generations to see. See you next time for another video. Thank you for watching.